Good evening, my dear friend, and welcome. Tonight, we will journey together into the gentle realms of an ancient myth, a tale whispered through the ages, now retold softly to ease you into restful sleep. Before we begin our story, take a moment to find comfort. Let your body sink into your bed, feeling the softness of your pillow and the warmth of your blanket. Close your eyes if you wish, and allow the weight of the day to fall away. With each slow breath in, draw in peace and calm. With each breath out, release any lingering worry or tension. This is your time to unwind, and there is nothing you need to do now except listen and drift, safe and at ease. In this relaxed state, imagine yourself in another time and place. The night around you is tranquil, and a gentle silence fills the air. Let the quiet embrace you as you settle more deeply. I will guide you now to a faraway land, an ancient and mythical world where gods and nymphs wander in moonlit forests and over misty mountains. It is a peaceful world filled with the soft chorus of nature at dusk, distant crickets singing a lullaby, a breeze whispering through the leaves, and somewhere far off, the faint trickle of a hidden spring. As you listen to my voice, allow the images to blossom in your mind. We begin our tale on a hushed evening long ago, beneath the same stars that now watch over you. It is the story of Echo and Narcissus, a tale of love and longing told not with excitement, but with the calm tenderness of a bedtime story. Let each word guide you further into relaxation, as if you are floating on a gentle stream of words. And if you find your mind drifting away, or sleep coming to claim you, that is all right. This story will keep you company, softly guiding you into the realm of dreams. Now, with a slow and gentle breath, let us journey together to ancient Greece, to a time when myth and magic lived in the quiet of the forests. Long ago, in a sun-dappled valley at the foot of misty mountains, there lived a nymph named Echo. Echo was the spirit of the hills and woodlands, a graceful maiden who loved to roam the green forests. In those days, nymphs like Echo danced in hidden glades and sang sweet songs that echoed off the rocks and trees. Echo in particular was blessed with a musical voice as captivating as birdsong. When she laughed, the sound was so bright and merry that even the brooks and leaves seemed to join in her laughter. She was known for her lively spirit, and above all, for her endless, melodic chatter. Echo delighted in conversation with all the dwellers of the wild. She chatted with other nymphs in the groves, called playfully to fawns drinking from clear streams, and even murmured endearments to the flowers as she wandered by. She always had a story or a kind word for everyone she met. Many mornings she could be found perched on a mossy rock ledge overlooking a valley, telling tales to the wind, her words drifting gently through the morning mist. Her sister smiled at her excitable nature, for Echo was always brimming with things to say. Her heart was warm and open, and her voice was the joyous instrument through which she expressed every emotion and thought. In the quiet hours of afternoon, when the sun filtered gold through the pines, Echo's voice might carry softly through the forest. Perhaps she would be humming a lilting tune taught by the river, or reciting a playful poem about the clouds overhead. Creatures of the forest felt at ease in her presence, for her voice told them that all was well. There was a comforting magic in the way Echo spoke. It was as if the very air listened and responded to her affection. Indeed, one could imagine that every echo heard in those mountains was simply the woodlands answering back to their beloved nymph, Echo. It so happened that Echo's gift of gab, her love of talking, led her into trouble with the Queen of the Heavens herself. High upon Mount Olympus, the gods and goddesses kept watch over mortal and immortal alike. Among them was Hera, regal queen of the gods. Hera was powerful and proud, the protector of marriage and women, and she was known for her temper, especially when her husband Zeus strayed from her. Zeus, the king of the gods, had a wandering heart and often visited the earth in disguise to spend time with nymphs and other mortals. Hera, ever watchful, pursued him, determined to catch any betrayal. One day, Zeus was amusing himself in the forest with a group of playful mountain nymphs. They laughed and played in a sunny meadow, hidden deep among the trees. Echo was not with them at first, but when Hera descended from the sky in search of Zeus, Echo happened upon the goddess along a wooded path. Hera's arrival was sudden, a rustle of wind through the branches, a flash of peacock-bright light as she landed. Tall and majestic, with gravity in her gaze, Hera swept through the forest like a storm. Echo sensed the goddess's purpose. Hera suspected Zeus was nearby, dallying with the nymphs. To protect her sisters, and perhaps out of the kindness in her heart, Echo stepped forward to meet Hera. She greeted the Queen of the Gods with a deep bow and a polite, innocent smile. Immediately, Echo began to speak, her words flowing in a warm, soothing rush to delay Hera's pursuit. She praised Hera's radiant beauty and noble status, and then rambled about trivial things. She commented on how lovely the weather was on Olympus that day, mused about the serenity of the forest, and shared any pleasant thought that came to mind. Echo's silvery voice rang out beneath the trees, spilling story after story, each designed to charm and distract. Hera, intent on finding Zeus, found herself oddly held back by the nymph's endless prattle. The moments stretched on, and with each passing heartbeat, Zeus and the other nymphs slipped further away to safety, hidden deeper in the woods. By the time Hera gently but firmly extricated herself from Echo's chatter, the forest had gone quiet. Zeus and his companions had vanished like morning dew. Realizing that Echo's quick tongue had deliberately delayed her, Hera's eyes flared with anger. The forest stillness deepened. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Echo, sensing the change in Hera's demeanor, fell silent at once, her heart pounding with sudden fear. The great goddess Hera fixed the nymph with a stern, unforgiving gaze. When Hera spoke, her voice was low and controlled, which made it all the more frightening. "You dared to trick me with your tongue, Echo?" she asked softly, each word measured. Echo opened her mouth, desperate to plead that she meant no harm, that she only hoped to spare her fellow nymphs from Hera's wrath. But Hera raised an elegant hand to silence her. Shafts of late-day sunlight slanted through the trees, illuminating Hera's face in a golden glow as she pronounced Echo's fate. "For your insolence," Hera declared, "I take from you the free use of that tongue you used against me. You will keep only half your voice, child. From this moment on, you shall have no voice of your own, only the power to repeat the last words that others say. Never again will you speak freely, but only echo the voices around you." Echo felt a shock, as though a cold wind had swept straight through her. She tried to cry out in protest or beg for mercy, but Hera's enchantment was already taking hold. The nymph's throat constricted. Her own words died before they could form. When she mustered all her will and finally managed to make a sound, it was not what she intended to say. Instead, the last word of Hera's curse fell from her lips in a faint, pleading tone. "Echo," she whispered, unwittingly repeating the final word of the goddess's decree. Hearing this pathetic repetition of her own word, Hera gave a small, mirthless smile at the aptness of what Echo had become. With that, the goddess turned away without another glance, ascending back through the air to the high halls of Olympus, leaving the nymph standing mute among the silent trees. For a long time, Echo remained where she was, stunned and heartbroken. The world around her felt terribly quiet now that her own voice was lost. She could hear the soft gurgle of a distant creek and the whisper of wind through pine needles, but she was afraid to test her voice further. At last, trembling, she attempted to speak some comfort to herself. A simple word, perhaps a hello or a why, anything to break her solitude. As she feared, only another's word came out. The forest had been still, and she had no syllables to borrow except her own last utterance. "Echo," she murmured again, and realized with despair that this forlorn word was both her name and all she was doomed to be. Overwhelmed with shame and sorrow, Echo fled deeper into the wilderness. She could not bear to face her sisters or friends, not like this, not when she could not truly speak to them. How could she explain what had happened if all she could do was mimic their last words? They might think her mocking or playing some strange game. It was easier to retreat and hide her condition. So Echo wandered alone through the forest and over the hills, keeping to the loneliest glens and crags, where once she would have filled the air with song and friendly calls. Now she moved in utter quiet, her lovely voice lost, except for those moments when she reflexively answered the sounds of the world around her. In her solitude, Echo discovered a hidden grotto high in the mountains, a secret cave draped with ivy and delicate ferns, with a floor of cool sand and a clear spring bubbling gently in its depths. This place became her refuge. Only faint beams of daylight reached inside, and the air was perpetually cool and damp. Here, she could hide her grief away from prying eyes. Many evenings, she sat at the cave's mouth and watched the sky beyond turn from blue to gold to purple dusk, and finally to star-sprinkled black. Not a word passed her lips unless some stray sound prompted it. If a mountain goat clattered a stone outside, or a raven cawed, only then a soft imitation would slip from Echo's lips, as Hera's curse compelled her to respond. In time, the creatures of those mountains grew accustomed to hearing their own noises, repeated softly from unseen corners and corridors of rock. They did not fear these echoes. To them, it was just another gentle trick of the wild, as natural as the way sound bounces off canyon walls. For Echo, however, life as a disembodied voice was deeply sad. She lived surrounded by the natural beauty she had always adored, tall ancient trees under which she had danced, clear streams that once sang along with her tunes, wide meadows where she could still twirl under the moonlight if she chose. Yet she could not truly join in the laughter or conversations of the world. Her joy was muted, just as her voice was. Still, she tried to find some measure of peace. She took to listening more than speaking, attuning herself to the forest's subtle music, rain pattering softly on leaves during sudden spring showers, distant thunder rumbling gently over far hills. When it sounded, she would whisper it back, answering the sky in her own quiet way, and the echo of her own footsteps when she ventured through hollow ravines. She imagined that the forest sought to comfort her, that the rustling of leaves in the breeze was the trees murmuring encouragement, and that the babbling of brooks was their way of conversing with her, since she could not converse as before. On clear nights, she would lie on a bed of moss outside her cave and gaze up at the countless stars, wondering if any gods watched her with pity or understanding. If they did, she heard no sign, only the soft sounds of nocturnal life, and occasionally her own faint voice, repeating the last notes of an owl's hoot or a wolf's distant howl. Thus, Echo passed her days and nights in quiet loneliness. Though wounded by what she had lost, she remained gentle at heart. The spark of her old self was not entirely extinguished. It glowed in the way she still appreciated the sunset's colors, or smiled faintly at the sight of a family of rabbits hopping across a path. But her laughter was rarely heard, and her words never, unless they were borrowed. Little did Echo know that her fate was soon to become entwined with that of a mortal whose own destiny held both beauty and tragedy. In those same woods and hills lived a young man named Narcissus, and the threads of their lives were about to cross in a way neither could have foreseen. Narcissus was the son of the river god Cephissus and a gentle nymph named Liriope. He was born where a clear stream meandered through the woods that Echo haunted, and from the moment he first drew breath, it was evident he was no ordinary child. His mother cradled him in the shallows of her father's river, marveling at the infant's exquisite features. His skin was soft and fair as ivory, his eyes as bright and blue as a summer sky reflected in water, and atop his little head curled locks of hair as golden as sunlight. Liriope felt both joy and apprehension at her son's extraordinary beauty. In a world of capricious gods and jealous hearts, such beauty could be as much a curse as a blessing. Wishing to understand what life awaited her son, Liriope traveled to consult a wise seer named Tiresias, whose prophecies were said never to miss their mark. In the dim light of a sacred cave, where the air smelled of damp stone and flickering torches cast dancing shadows, Liriope asked the old, sightless prophet whether Narcissus would live to see a ripe old age. Tiresias, his unseeing eyes turned inward to visions of fate, gave an answer as perplexing as it was brief. He will live long, provided he never knows himself. Liriope left the cave both relieved and puzzled. Her son could have a long life, but what could it mean for him to never know himself? Some riddles only time could unravel. Perhaps, she mused, it meant Narcissus should not become too vain or too self-aware of his beauty. Determined to help him avoid any self-destructive pride, Liriope resolved to raise Narcissus to be humble and kind. Narcissus grew from a lovely child into an even lovelier youth. By the time he reached his late teens, he was truly a sight to behold, and the rumors of his striking appearance spread far and wide. Wherever he went, eyes followed, enraptured. Mortal girls in nearby villages sighed at the mere mention of his name, and nymphs peeking out from behind trees would catch their breath at the vision of his face. Even young men found themselves drawn in admiration. He had a lithe, athletic form from a life spent hunting in the woods. His hair fell in honeyed waves that gleamed in the sun as if spun from the sun's own rays. His eyes held a lively sparkle, deep and clear, reminiscent of the very streams near which he'd been born. People who glimpsed him often whispered comparisons. He looked as radiant as Apollo, some said, or as if a master sculptor had carved a statue of the most perfect youth and then breathed life into it. With so much adoration surrounding him, Narcissus could not help but be aware of his own allure. Despite Liriope's gentle teachings, pride found a home in him. He recognized that he was different, special, and beautiful, and he carried himself accordingly. He was not cruel by nature, but he was indifferent to the feelings of those who adored him. Narcissus regarded the love that others offered him as a traveler regards flowers by the roadside, something that was simply there, to be passed by, perhaps appreciated briefly for its beauty, but not something to pick and keep. No one ever truly touched his heart, for he guarded it behind a wall of vanity and aloofness, whether he knew it or not. Many youths and maidens tried to win Narcissus's affection. It became almost an unspoken challenge among the nymphs of the rivers and trees. Who might be the one to claim the love of this unparalleled young man? Some brought him gifts, the first blooms of spring, garlands of wild flowers to crown his golden head, or baskets of sweet berries and honeycomb. Others tried to impress him with their own grace or wit, dancing for him in moonlit clearings, or singing soft melodies in hopes of drawing his praise. But Narcissus remained unmoved. He accepted the offerings and compliments with a polite smile or a nod, as if they were his due, but his heart never quickened for anyone. It was often whispered that Narcissus seemed to love only one thing: himself. On more than one occasion, a lovelorn maid following him through the woods would spot him pause by a still pond, not out of thirst, but seemingly to admire the reflection that gazed back at him from the water's surface. Indeed, Narcissus did take a certain pleasure in his own reflection. He knew of his beauty like one knows of the dawn's brilliance or the night's stars. It was simply a fact of life to him, something constant, and in that knowledge grew a quiet arrogance. None of the faces that gazed longingly at him stirred him, because in his eyes, none of them matched the flawless face he saw reflected back at himself. Yet, it should be said that Narcissus was not entirely heartless. When suitors poured out their hearts to him, he sometimes responded with a gentle sadness, as though he pitied them for reaching for something unattainable. He would let them down softly when he was in a kind mood, a murmured apology that he could not be what they hoped, a suggestion that they find happiness elsewhere. But there were times his patience wore thin, especially if someone would not take no for an answer. In those moments, a sharper edge would enter his tone, and the rejection could be cutting. Some who felt scorned by him nursed deep wounds. There were even dark tales told in hushed tones, one about a despairing youth who took his own life when Narcissus did not return his affection, and another of a nymph who wasted away until she turned into a thin reed, forever singing a mournful song when the wind passed over her. Whether these stories were true or embellished by rumor, they contributed to a growing resentment among certain hearts that Narcissus had spurned. As more time passed, several of those who had suffered because of Narcissus's unyielding pride lifted their prayers to the heavens. Under the cold glow of the moon or in the temple shadows, forsaken lovers whispered pleas that Narcissus himself might one day know the pain of unreturned love. These fervent prayers were not ignored. Nemesis, the goddess who is the bringer of balance and retribution, heard them. Nemesis walks quietly, without fanfare, and rights the scales of fortune when they have tipped too far. For a long while, she watched Narcissus from afar, this dazzling youth who broke hearts as easily as one might crush a wildflower underfoot, yet often without malicious intent, simply through self-absorption. Perhaps Nemesis saw in him a fitting target for a lesson in humility. Perhaps she sought to answer the collective cry of the wounded hearts. Either way, fate, once set in motion, would soon lead Narcissus to an encounter that would change everything. Unaware of what the gods were weaving for him, Narcissus continued his carefree existence. One late afternoon, the air golden and thick with the scent of pine and wild thyme, Narcissus went hunting in the woods with a small band of companions. They spent the day pursuing a magnificent stag uphill and down dale. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Narcissus had outpaced his companions in the thrill of the chase. Eventually, with the stag escaping into a thicket and the excitement of the hunt fading, Narcissus found himself alone in a part of the forest he did not recognize. His brow glistened with perspiration, and his limbs felt a pleasant weariness from the day's exertions. The calls of his friends were distant now. Perhaps they had taken a different route or paused to rest. Narcissus, too, felt the dryness in his throat and thought it wise to find a spring to drink from before making his way back. The woods here were hushed and ancient. Towering cedars and oaks, their trunks wrapped in moss, stood like silent guardians. Underfoot, the ground was soft with centuries of fallen leaves. As Narcissus walked, he allowed himself to slow down and appreciate the serene beauty around him. Sunbeams slanted through the trees, illuminating little swirls of dust and giving the forest an otherworldly glow. Here and there, shafts of light caught on a clump of ferns or the white bark of a birch, creating gentle contrasts of shadow and light. The only sound was the steady hum of cicadas and the occasional flutter of wings as a bird settled down for the evening. Narcissus closed his eyes for a moment, letting a stray breeze cool his face. In that moment of stillness, he caught the faint but unmistakable sound of running water, a soft gurgle as of a spring or stream somewhere to his left. Thirst and curiosity spurred him on. He followed the sound, pushing gently through a curtain of willow branches and stepping over a patch of blue wildflowers that carpeted the forest floor. Each step brought the water's murmur a little louder until he emerged into a small clearing. There, hidden away, as if it were a secret kept by the forest, was one of the most beautiful sights Narcissus had ever seen. A pool of water, no larger than a small pond, lay at the center of the glade. Its waters were astonishingly clear and still, fed by a tiny spring that bubbled up from a cluster of smooth stones at one edge. The spring's outflow was so gentle that it barely caused a ripple. The pool was like a flawless mirror set into the earth. Around it, lush green moss spread out like an emerald carpet, studded with tiny white and purple flowers, whose perfume was delicate and soothing. Slender trees encircled the area, graceful birches and young poplars, their leaves forming a lacy canopy overhead. Sunlight filtered through in soft beams, dancing on the glassy water. Everything about this place felt untouched and tranquil, as if mortal eyes had never fallen upon it before that moment. A quiet smile of delight appeared on Narcissus's face. He felt as if he had wandered into a sanctuary. With careful steps, he approached the water's edge. He could see clean pebbles lining the bottom, even at the pool's center. That's how clear and pure it was. Setting aside his hunting spear and quiver of arrows, Narcissus knelt and dipped his hand into the water. It was deliciously cool. Cupping his hands, he lifted some to his lips and drank. The water tasted fresh, with a sweetness that only untouched spring water has. It was as if he were drinking the kindness of the forest itself. He sighed in contentment as the water quenched his thirst and refreshed his tired body. As Narcissus leaned over the pool for another drink, a movement in the water made him pause. There, just beneath the surface, a face seemed to be looking up at him, crystal clear. Narcissus blinked in surprise. The face was youthful and strikingly handsome, a shock of damp golden hair framing a smooth brow, earnest blue eyes, and cheeks warmed by a soft, rosy hue from the exertion of the day. For a heartbeat, Narcissus thought he had stumbled upon someone hiding beneath the water's surface, or perhaps a naiad, the water nymph of this spring, who had revealed herself. He had heard tales of such nymphs, lovely maidens of the water, who occasionally showed themselves to mortals they found intriguing. He smiled down at the face and saw it smile back at him. A thrill coursed through Narcissus. This mysterious being seemed to be responding to him. He tilted his head to the side, and the reflection mimicked him perfectly. If it was a naiad, she, or was it he, was playfully mirroring his movements. Narcissus had never seen anyone who matched his own beauty so closely. In fact, he realized with a kind of curious wonder he had never seen anyone besides himself with this exact face, except in glimpses on the surface of other waters or shining bronze. Slowly, the truth began to dawn on him, but it was a truth he unconsciously resisted. It was so much more enchanting to believe that this was another person gazing back at him, someone who was just as captivated by Narcissus as the rest of the world, and whose loveliness Narcissus could finally admire freely without reserve. "Hello," Narcissus whispered softly, feeling a little silly but compelled to greet the vision. His voice was tender in the quiet glade. Of course, the only response was the slight parting of the reflection's lips, mirroring the movements of his own mouth, and perhaps the faintest echo of his greeting bouncing back from the surrounding trees. Hello, so soft it might have been imagined. Narcissus's heart swelled. To him, it felt as though the beautiful stranger in the water was whispering a greeting back. He had long ignored the courtship of others, but now it was as if love itself had finally come to claim him, in the form of this ideal being who could be his twin. He reached a hand towards the pool, wanting to touch the cheek of this entrancing other. His fingertips skimmed the surface, and at once the image shattered into ripples. The face blurred and disappeared as circles of water spread outward from where his hand disturbed the mirror. Alarmed, Narcissus drew back. The water calmed and the reflection reformed, looking up at him once more. The expression in those clear eyes, his own eyes, though he didn't fully grasp it, seemed to hold longing equal to his own. Narcissus chuckled softly at himself. How foolish to startle the vision by trying to touch it. If this was indeed a naiad or spirit, perhaps the water's surface was like a veil that could not be broken so easily. He spoke again, as gently as one coaxes a shy fawn. Please don't run away. Stay with me. The only voice answering was his own echo, returning from the woods. With me, it sighed. Narcissus heard it and fancied that the being in the water was indeed trying to speak with him, but could only repeat his words, almost as if it were cursed with echoes of affliction. In that moment, Narcissus felt an overwhelming compassion and affection. He knew what it was to have so many yearn for him. Now, he himself yearned. It was a new and intense experience. The more he gazed, the deeper he fell in love with the graceful shape of the reflected form, the way the curls of hair fell over a smooth forehead, and the tender look he thought he saw in those mirrored eyes. Time seemed to stop in that hidden glade. Narcissus lost track of how long he knelt there. The sun slipped lower, and the slanting rays turned more orange, then red, then faded to the gentle silver of twilight, and still Narcissus remained. Eventually, dusk settled around him, the pool reflecting the first twinkle of stars and the pale face of the rising moon. In all that time, Narcissus barely moved. He would speak now and then, soft, loving murmurs to the one in the water, admiring little praises, sweet nothings that he imagined a lover might say. And though no voice answered except his own echo on the breeze, he felt as though an unspoken conversation was flowing between his heart and that other heart just beyond the veil of the water's surface. High above, unseen in the gathering dusk, Nemesis watched with somber satisfaction. The trap of fate had sprung, not with violence or cruelty, but with a poignant symmetry. Narcissus had finally found someone he truly wanted, but that someone was nothing more than his own reflection, forever present, yet forever out of reach. The goddess of retribution did not exult or gloat. She merely observed that balance had been restored. the one who caused unrequited love, now suffered it. When night fully fell and the woods grew dark, Narcissus would not leave the pool. In fact, he scarcely noticed the darkness. The moonlight on the water was enough for him to make out the faint outline of his beloved reflection. And in truth, even if he could see nothing, he might have stayed. So unwilling was he to part from this place. He was like a man enchanted, no shackles on his wrists, yet bound tighter than any prisoner by the invisible chains of infatuation. Eventually, exhaustion began to tug at Narcissus. His body, mortal and needing rest, could not go on indefinitely. Yet he fought against it, nodding off only to startle himself awake, afraid that if he slept, the beautiful presence in the pool might disappear. He spoke through a yawn in a trembling voice, a question that had been weighing on him. "Why can I not be with you?" Of course, only the forest answered with a faint echo, "With you." And perhaps it was that ghostly repetition, or simply the silence that followed, that at last made Narcissus confront the reality of what he was seeing. In the stillness of midnight, under a canopy of stars, the truth crept upon him like a slow dawn. He looked more intently at the face in the water, studying every feature, and recognized them as his own. It was as if he were truly seeing himself for the first time, not through the vanity that had clouded him, but as a separate being. Tears filled his eyes as the depth of his plight became clear. The prophecy of Tiresias rang in his mind. Narcissus would live a long life, so long as he never knows himself. A sorrowful laugh escaped him, and in that lonely glade, it sounded like a sob. "I have known myself," he whispered, voice quavering. "I have fallen in love with myself, and now I see why that prophecy was a warning." He understood at last that the relentless love consuming him was for an illusion, a part of himself that he could never separate and hold. He was both the lover and the loved, the seeker and the sought, forever chasing his own tail, as it were. And what a cruel fate, to hunger for one's own reflection, to adore it, yet to be unable to truly embrace it. All the times he had spurned others, he never imagined love could feel like this. A sweet promise, always a breath away from fulfillment, turning bitter when one reaches for it. He remembered the hopeless eyes of those who had yearned for him, and now he wore that same look in his own eyes. "Oh, all those hearts," Narcissus murmured brokenly. "All those I made suffer. Was it for this? Am I now to suffer just the same?" In the silence that followed, a gentle sound came floating through the woods. "The same," sighed a voice. It was Echo, lingering unseen among the trees, faithfully reflecting his words. Startled, Narcissus glanced around briefly, but he was weak and so focused on his sorrow that he quickly turned back to the pool. He assumed the echo was simply the natural rebound of his lament, not realizing that the real echo, the nymph, was indeed nearby, drawn by his presence and his tragic monologue. Echo had been roaming the area as an invisible whisper when she caught the sound of Narcissus's voice. Recognizing it, she had approached, flitting through the dark like a breeze. When she saw the scene, Narcissus stretched out by the water, tearful and tormented. She realized what had happened. Her love, the very reason for her suffering, was now suffering the same pain of unrequited love. Echo's heart ached. She no longer had a body to hold him or hands to caress his hair, but she stayed with him in the only way she could, repeating his soft exclamations so that he might feel less alone, as if someone out there understood his agony. All through that night, Narcissus faded between wakefulness and a feverish dream state, never fully leaving consciousness, but never finding true rest either. He continued to converse with the image in the water, sometimes pleading gently, sometimes crying softly, sometimes simply staring in despair. Each time he voiced a fragment of his woe. "Why won't you come to me? I love you so much." Or simply, "Alas," Echo answered with his own words, "Come to me, love you, alas," giving back to him what little comfort she could by reflecting his voice. Perhaps in his daze, he thought it was the forest sympathizing, or the water spirit speaking at last. It made no difference. At least he was not met with total silence. As the first pale light of dawn crept into the sky, Narcissus felt his strength nearly gone. He had neither slept properly nor eaten, and his body was beginning to fail under the strain of his vigil. The rosy fingers of the sunrise found him still lying by the pool, lips cracked and throat parched, but unwilling to leave even for a moment. The reflection in the water looked back at him, just as wan and sorrowful as he himself. In the morning light, Narcissus could see how haggard he had become. The glow that once graced his cheeks was dimmed, the luster in his hair dulled, his eyes bloodshot from tears. Yet to him, the vision was still heartbreakingly beautiful. He knew in his heart that he could not continue much longer. Mortal life, after all, has its limits. Narcissus realized that the end of his story might be near, and strangely, the thought did not frighten him. If anything, it brought a kind of forlorn peace. He had finally experienced love, not the superficial love of admirers praising him, but genuine love born from his own heart. And even though it was tragically misdirected, it had opened his heart in a way nothing else ever had. In these last moments, he even thought of Echo, the girl he had pushed away, and of others he had dismissed, and he felt a rueful kinship with them. "I am sorry," he whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the memory of all those wounded souls. Echo, hearing this faint apology, echoed, "Sorry," so quietly that even Narcissus didn't notice it, but perhaps his spirit did. Narcissus gazed one last time at his reflection. The morning was moving on, and the sun was climbing, its warmth beginning to fill the glade. The image in the water was less sharp now, as the spring's flow caused gentle ripples. "Farewell, my love," Narcissus said softly to the face in the pool, mustering a sad smile. "Farewell." As he spoke the words, a tear rolled down his cheek and fell into the water, sending a shiver through the reflection. From the forest around him came a sorrowful echo. "Farewell," Echo repeated, her own spirit breaking at the finality of it. With that, Narcissus seemed to accept his fate. His body, exhausted, finally gave in. He eased himself down fully onto the soft moss by the pool, resting his head as if on a pillow of green, one hand draped into the cool water, as if reaching for his beloved even in his last breath. His eyes closed gently, lashes resting against cheeks that had once glowed with health and pride. A calm, almost contented expression came over his face, as if in that farewell he had found a sliver of understanding or release. His breathing slowed, each inhale shallower than the last, until it could barely be discerned. And as the sun reached its zenith, Narcissus slipped away, leaving the mortal world as quietly as a flame going out. Echo lingered, grief-stricken and tender. Though she could not weep in a physical sense, her whole being mourned. She whispered farewell again, an ethereal lament that floated through the empty glade. She repeated Narcissus's name in gentle succession. Narcissus, Narcissus, as if singing a lullaby to his departed spirit. The trees stood silent witness, their leaves barely rustling. The water of the pool flowed steadily, and now that Narcissus no longer gazed into it, it reflected only the sky above, blue and infinite as his eyes had been. Not long after, Narcissus's hunting companions, who had searched throughout the night and into the morning for him, came near the hidden clearing. They had been calling his name far and wide, worry sharpening their voices. It was Echo's own nature to answer such calls, and she did so sparingly, giving them faint hints of Narcissus from time to time, guiding them unknowingly to the spot. Thus it was that a group of nymphs and youths discovered the secret glade by early afternoon. What they found there left them in awe and sorrow. At first, they saw what looked like Narcissus lying peacefully by a lovely pool, as if asleep. They approached quietly, hope and dread intermingled in their hearts. A few called out to him, but he did not stir. One of Narcissus's dearest friends, a young man who had often accompanied him on hunts, knelt and gently touched his shoulder. There was no life left in the body. Narcissus had gone where they could not follow. A wave of grief swept through the gathering. Some of the nymphs began to weep softly, tears falling onto the moss. Even those who had perhaps secretly resented his arrogance felt no triumph, only the poignancy of a life ended too soon and in such a lonely way. They decided to perform the customary rites, With great care, they prepared to lift Narcissus and build a funeral pyre to cremate him, as was the tradition for beloved friends and heroes, so that his spirit might be honorably sent to the afterworld. Two strong youths stepped forward and gently slid their arms beneath Narcissus to raise him. But as they did, something miraculous happened. Narcissus's body was no longer there to be lifted. In the spot where he had lain, there was now only the impression of his form in the grass and a delicate plant rooted in the soil. Gasps of astonishment and cries of surprise rose from the group. In place of the youth's body, a green stem sprouted from the earth, and atop it bloomed a flower of unearthly beauty. 6 pristine white petals formed a star-like corona around a yellow center, and the flower's head was bowed slightly, as if in modesty or grief. It was a narcissus flower, one that none of them had ever seen before, but which we know now in springtimes by the water's edge, also called a daffodil. A gentle perfume wafted from it, sweet and comforting. The nymphs and hunters looked upon this bloom and understood that it was a gift and a sign. The gods or nature itself had transformed Narcissus into this flower. Perhaps it was a kindness to let him become part of the gentle world he had loved, or to immortalize him as a thing of beauty that returns year after year. The pool's edge would forever be graced by his new form. There was reverence in their faces as they knelt around the bloom. One of the maidens, who had secretly loved Narcissus and had been among those praying for him to find humility, reached out and softly touched a petal. She then drew back and kissed her fingertips, a silent farewell. They decided not to build a pyre after all. This place, this glade, was Narcissus's resting place now. Instead, they tidied the clearing with gentle hands, brushing aside disturbed moss, gathering Narcissus's spear and quiver, which they would later leave at his home as mementos, and stood in a circle around the flower to pay their final respects. Each in turn spoke in hushed tones of Narcissus, recalling his unparalleled beauty, his skill in the hunt, perhaps even his aloof charm. Some expressed regret that he hadn't allowed anyone truly into his heart, but hoped his soul had found peace. As they said these things, Echo listened from the fringe of the clearing. She felt each tribute keenly, and though she could not join in with words of her own, she echoed here and there small fragments. If someone said, "Beautiful," a faint, "Beautiful," drifted through the air. If another sighed, "Farewell, friend," Echo whispered, "Friend," from the rocks. In this way, she quietly participated in the mourning, weaving her voice among theirs in support and sympathy. When it came time to depart, the group was reluctant to leave Narcissus alone in that quiet place, even if he was now a flower and beyond earthly loneliness. They decided to return often to care for the area, to ensure the flower grew strong, and to remember him. One by one, they offered their personal goodbyes. The young man who had first touched Narcissus's shoulder bent by the flower and said softly, "Goodbye, dear Narcissus. May you find in the next life the love you never found here." Echo, ever gentle, returned his goodbye with one of her own. "Goodbye," she breathed, her invisible presence giving the word a tender, lingering resonance. Those present started at the eerily apt reply. Some smiled through their tears, taking it as a final acknowledgement from the spirit of the forest that maybe Narcissus's own spirit was echoing their grief, or perhaps Echo the nymph, whom a few knew of from myth, was there to provide a voice to unspoken emotions. Either way, it comforted them. At last, with heavy hearts, the group departed the clearing, leaving it as pristine as they found it, save for the new addition of the Narcissus bloom. They walked away quietly, disappearing into the trees in twos and threes, casting glances back at the solitary flower shining white in the afternoon light. By evening, the glade was empty of mortals. Only the Narcissus flower remained by the silent, clear pool, an echo who would not forsake her vigil. In the days that followed, word spread of the youth who turned into a flower. People came quietly, in ones or twos, to see the spot. They found not one flower, but several. During the time since the transformation, it was as if the earth had birthed a small cluster of them around the pool's edge. The story of Echo and Narcissus was whispered among these visitors. Some told of how Echo's love and Hera's curse led her to fade until only her voice remained, and that to this day she answers our calls in lonely places. Others recounted Narcissus's vanity and his strange fate, reflecting on the lessons it held about pride, love, and self-absorption. Always, the visitors would lower their voices in the glade, sensing it was hallowed by the events that transpired. Some claimed that if you listened very closely, you could hear the faint sound of someone crying or sighing among the rocks, a claim perhaps inspired by Echo's unseen presence. Indeed, Echo stayed near that pool for a very long time, bound by love. Invisible and incorporeal, she had no form to grow weary, and so her spirit merged with the whisper of breezes and the breath of the cave. She called Narcissus's name now and then, not expecting an answer, but simply to hear it and keep his memory alive. And each time, the surrounding rocks and hills returned his name to her, a constant reminder of what she had lost and how fate had entwined them, however tragically. Yet, as seasons turned and years rolled by, even Echo's sharp grief began to smooth into something gentler. She became one with the natural echoes of the world, less a grieving nymph and more a part of the fabric of nature. Her voice was the mountain's voice, and the mountain's voice was hers. She was present whenever a canyon tossed back a traveler's shout, or when empty halls repeated the last words spoken within. People came to personify all echoes as the nymph Echo, giving a bittersweet beauty to those fleeting sounds. In this way, Echo lived on, unaging and undying, as all nymphs do in one form or another. Her essence diffused across the lonely places of the earth. And Narcissus, some say that after death, his spirit crossed into the underworld and found its way to the dark waters of the river Styx, where even there he paused to gaze at his reflection in those black depths, still captivated beyond the grave. But that is a more somber footnote, and on this gentle night we need not follow his spirit to such dreary realms. We can remember Narcissus best as he became, the delicate flower that still bears his name. Each spring, when you see a narcissus or daffodil blooming by water or in fields, white petals shining and head slightly bowed, you are witnessing the return of the youth in a kinder form. He decorates the world now rather than shutting it out. He brings joy to those who behold him, a humble blossom rather than a proud man. There is a quiet redemption in that. Now, our tale of Echo and Narcissus has been lovingly told, and it comes to rest like a feather settling on soft ground. Think back on the images if you're still awake. The moonlit forest clearing, the still pool reflecting stars, the white flowers glowing at the water's edge, and the faint presence of a kind echo drifting between the trees. It's a scene of tranquility and gentle melancholy, but also of resolution. The hubris of Narcissus met its end, and from it bloomed something pure. The despair of Echo found a purpose, albeit a sad one, and she became woven into the world she loved. In the end, their story leaves behind a sense of peace, like the calm after a long, emotional day. Let us leave the ancient forest now. The night is deep, and all the characters of our myth are at rest. Echo's voice is but a soft breath in the background. Narcissus's flower is closed in sleep by the water. The glade lies under the silver gaze of the moon, quiet and still. Imagine that serene spot as if it is your own resting place for your mind. There is a stillness there and a gentle presence of nature that watches over everything calmly. In this quiet moment, turn your awareness back to your own body and the bed where you lie. Feel how the mattress supports you, how the pillow cradles your head. The air around you is as tranquil as the air of that mythic forest. With your eyes closed, you might picture a soft starlight filtering in, or perhaps the safe darkness behind your eyelids is its own comforting blanket. Your breathing is slow and steady, in and out, like a gentle tide, or like the rhythmic rise and fall of a sleeping forest's breath. If you listen to your breath, maybe you can imagine Echo listening too, and repeating it softly somewhere in the distance, an echo of a breath, reminding you that you are not alone, that the world around you is responsive and caring in its own subtle way. Each breath out is like casting your own gentle voice into the world, and each breath in is the world echoing back peace and calm to you. Your mind can let go now of Echo and Narcissus and any other thoughts. They have been set free into the night, their story wrapped up, their spirits at ease. There's no need for any more words or any more listening, just the soft lulling sounds of a quiet room, perhaps the faint hum of night or the hush of a home at rest. If any stray thoughts come, acknowledge them and let them float away as echo's voice floated on the breeze. They will fade into the background, leaving you with a comfortable silence. Feel the gentle heaviness of sleepiness in your limbs, in your eyelids, in each slow heartbeat. You have done well to travel through this story, and now the journey's end is a warm, welcoming rest. Surrender to it as naturally as Narcissus surrendered to the stillness by the pool, but without any of his longing or pain, only the ease he found at the very end, when he lay down and smiled, thinking of love. Surrender as Echo did, finally dissolving into the elements she adored, becoming one with the lullaby of nature. Know that in this moment you are cherished and safe. The world around you holds you gently as the forest held our myth. You are loved perhaps by people in your life, perhaps by the simple goodness of the universe, but loved nonetheless, and you can carry that knowledge into your sleep. There is nothing you need to do, nothing you need to be, except who you are right now. A person lying quietly, breathing, drifting, and deserving of rest. Let the last images of the story flicker and fade. The reflective pool, now empty and calm. The white narcissus flowers nodding in a light night breeze. The silhouette of a nymph among the trees, dissolving into moonlight. All is well in that world, and all is well in your world at this very moment. It is time now, time to let go and allow yourself to slip into the soft darkness of sleep. Feel how inviting it is, like a cool, gentle night that welcomes you to close your eyes and dream. Any echoes of this tale will now quiet down, and only a soothing silence remains, like the pause after a bedtime song has ended, when a child finally drifts off. I wish you the sweetest of dreams. May they be calm and filled with peaceful scenes, perhaps a quiet forest, or a garden of white flowers by a mirror-like pond where everything is safe and loving. May you sleep deeply and soundly, your mind and body resting fully, healing and rejuvenating with each breath. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through myth and night. The story will continue to watch over you even as you sleep, its ancient wisdom and calm imagery guarding your rest. Now, dear friend, close your eyes if they aren't already closed, and allow the sleep to wash over you like a comforting wave. Good night and sleep well.